Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Ellensburg, Washington, USA. Thank you for joining us. The local time is 8:47, and we will begin this program at the top of the hour. I don't know, is that like 12 minutes from now? Something like that? 12 minutes from now. If you're watching this as a replay, you can go ahead and scrub ahead 12 minutes to the beginning of the program. But for the rest of us, we're going to talk a little bit, say hi to each other, and give you a little story about Michael in Janesville, Wisconsin, and his inspiration to involve bijou in the program. Let's say hi to a few of you, and then we will, I'll make sure to email Bob, and then we'll talk about bijou. Wolverhampton, UK. Hello, Michael. Hello, William. Myrtle Creek, Oregon. Dennis is in Ottawa, Canada. 5x5. Thank you for the report. Warren, Maine. Come on, wake up. Warren, Maine. Detroit, Suburbia. Part of it's scrolling too fast. Red Deer, Alberta. Puyallup, Washington. Natchez, Washington. West Allis, Wisconsin. South Vancouver Island. Webb Lake, Wisconsin. Freezing, Selma, Oregon. Boulder, Colorado. Baltimore, Maryland. Bob's in here. Hildebrand's in the live chat. All right, that's a first. Having a guest chit chat with everybody before he's getting the email. That's fun. Anthony's in Helena, Montana. Liberty, Washington. Hello. Calgary, Alberta. Littleton, Colorado. The Tennessee-Alabama border. Andres from Bonaire, the Dutch Caribbean. Thank you. Waikele, Hawaii is very early there. Thank you for joining us. Garrett, the Dutch Night Owl from the Netherlands. Hello. Hello, Garrett. Mountain Lake Terrace, that's in the Seattle area. Bo is in Denmark. Göteborg, Sweden. Hello, Kirk. Marysville, Washington, and so on. Okay, well, let me email Bob. And he wants that email sent a variety of places. So, Bob, if you're watching, I'm about to send this using my Gmail account. Okay, Bob, I just sent it to 3 different places. Are we still going, by the way? I mistakenly opened the link. So I think I've got 2 things open. That's not a good sign. Are we still functional at the moment? If so, I'm going to close this other thing. Are we working right now? 5x5? Delay in the comments? Okay. Close this up. That's never happened. Let me close this other window. Okay, thank you. All right, well, thanks. Hi to a few more, and then I'll tell you my Michael. I'll do my Michael thing now. So it's been steady. Comments from you over the last couple of years. Anytime I mention Bijou the cat or my backyard or anything like that, a bunch of you say, oh, I miss Bijou and I miss the backyard and everything else. Well, Michael in Janesville said, he emailed me a week ago or so and said, I have an idea. I know you can't bring Bijou from home into school. And yeah, that's right. I don't think I'm interested even if I could. But he said, would you mind sending me a few photos of Bijou? And I've got an idea. So I did that. I said, thank you, Michael. That's nice of you. And so arriving at the house yesterday was a print. So Michael's got a printer. And so That's Bijou on the roof of our house. This is Bijou outside of our mudroom door. Also giving detailed instructions on how to assemble a diorama. I'm sorry, Michael, I'm not much of a rule follower. I'm sorry. But I just want to share the things that Michael was able to share with us here. Clockwise rotation. Declination, I don't care about declination, says Randy Ankin. So Michael in Janesville, Wisconsin, thank you for your artistry and your inspiration. And we'll keep Bijou up here on the chalkboard the rest of the way. All right, there's Bob Hildebrand. He's in the green room. That's nice to see, Bob. Hello, I see a live picture of you, and I see your shared screen as well, Bob. And that, oh, I see. That's a photo with some license plate. Got it. Okay. Yeah, so I think we're ready, Bob. I think we're golden. Are you live right now? Can you wave to me? Make sure are we communicating? Well, he can't hear me at the moment. Bob, can you hear me? Well, I have a live picture of Bob, but I don't think he hears me. So we'll figure that out. But it looks like we're good otherwise. We'll say hi to a few more of you, and then I got to start concentrating. Although, do I really? I'm down to one chalkboard today. Oh, now we have a third Hildebrand thing in the green room. Good morning, Bob. Can you hear me with that live picture? Can you hear me, Bob? Can you wave? We can't hear you. Okay. Yeah. So we'll figure it out once we get you on camera. Right now, I've got 3 versions of you in the green room. Yeah. We'll figure it out once we get you on. All right. Vancouver, Washington, good morning. Wapato, that's Dave Green. Hi, Dave. Quebec City, that's Luke. London calling, Red Leicester's in London, England. Michael's in Indianapolis, Indiana. Don is back from the Tanana terrain in Fairbanks, Alaska. Hello, Don. Asakura Mining says, how am I doing? I'm doing very well. Thank you for asking. Myra is in Quesnel. Hey, Myra, I'm not sure I've seen your name in a while. Myra is shivering up in Quesnel at minus 11 C. Looks like Gary Paul's here. Backcountry Gary's in the hizzy. Bunny, Oregon. Everyone's saying thanks to Michael in Janesville. That's nice. Terrific. Bijou is a mega whale enthusiast. Yeah. All right, down to live, we'll say hi to a few more and start concentrating. Bob, I'm thinking 10 minutes. I'm going to do 10 minutes just on one chalkboard, and then we're coming to you. That's the general plan. There's Sabo, or sorry, there's Saber. He's in Cabo Pulma National Park, BCS, Mexico. Hello, Saber. Thanks for checking in again on your Mexican travels. Bob's in Albany, Oregon. Wanda is in Middle Georgia, USA. Carol says, hello from Florida. Eric's in Marion, Virginia. Bob and Kathy in Woodinville, Washington. Yeah, Lindsay. I need to set them up a little bit. We gotta keep a little bit of a thread from past shows. Kimberly says, just starting to snow in Nampa, Idaho. That's outside of Boise. Thank you for that report. Yeah, I don't know what it is. It's getting colder around here. that crazy warm stretch this week is about done. The cold air is flowing into our valley, and I think we'll be below freezing for the next few days, but nothing compared to some of your temperatures that you're recording. So as usual, sometimes we're cold, but not that cold. Sometimes we're warm, but not that warm. It's like some sort of Goldilocks bullshit. All right. Sorry, Patrick. Dixie Doodle says, happy Saturday, everyone. That's a nice attitude. Thank you. And Marcia's from Gunnison, Colorado, and Dick is in Nieuwegein, the Netherlands. Sorry about that, Dick. Hello. Clifford's in Bellingham, Washington. Elaine reports that her friend Kathy is visiting from Selah, Washington. All right. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's say one more thing to Bob. So Bob, just letting you know, I've got your shared slides. That's the most important part. I've got 2 live versions of you. Looks like 2 different cameras. And so it's okay. Keep them like that, and we'll just figure out which is the best one to use. But possibly your phone is also a live stream at the moment. Whatever. I'm just letting you know we'll do a little bit of jockeying a little bit once we get you on, but we'll make it work. There's no pressure. There's no pressure, Bob. Okay, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning. I'm really looking forward to this. We have how many we have watching? That window needs to be refreshed, I guess. Yeah, 626 watching live. Okay, and more will filter in. Thank you for joining us. We'll begin in 2 minutes. Hot mic. All right, I got 1 minute. Okay, you're setting up Bob. Talk about dots. Define the main message today. Talk about the 2 shows. Start with talking about the 2 shows. Save the laptop till after. Emphasize that this morning is unusual. Lay out the ground rules. Be a good listener. Okay. All right. You can do this. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Ellensburg, Washington, USA, home of Central Washington University, for those keeping score at home. I'm so glad that you're with us this morning. I think you will enjoy today, and you will enjoy the next show as well, because our guest this morning, Robert S. Hildebrand, is with us this morning, Saturday morning, and he's coming back on Wednesday at 2 p.m. Pacific time. So, I don't know if I need to show you this one more time or not, but here we are at the last show of January, session T, and February 1st, Bob is coming back for session U at 2 p.m. Pacific time. I want to show you the title of both of these installments so you have a sense of what Bob has up his sleeve. This is an unusual show. I talked about this at the end of the Stephen Johnston episode last time. Bob requested to share a lot of slides, a lot of visuals for us, and that's one of his main strengths. He creates these unbelievably beautiful pastel-colored maps and illustrations and diagrams and plots, discrimination plots. And so this is the best way to absorb the world of Hildebrand, by getting it from him directly, but getting all these slides. So we will not be doing a lot of back and forth in the format that we've had up to this point. but I think it is important. I think it's instructive to let you know that this Bob Fest 2023 is broken down into these two installments. And there will be a show on Wednesday talking about Baja BC specifically. Bob is going to share some of his thoughts on possibly resolving this Baja BC controversy. So I'm letting you know that we might put you off. We might put some of your questions off until Wednesday because of the plan here. I'll let Bob put a couple things off or try to answer your questions directly. We will have some live Q&A. That can't go away. That's a big part of this series. So we will have a chance for you to ask questions of Bob after we go through his slides. But we're talking about plutons, batholiths today. We're talking about evidence for westward subduction, similar to past shows, but also some differences from Bob today. And then again, we're heading towards here for part 2 of the Bob experience. So there is no shortage of Hildebrand to read from the last 15 years. And in some of these publications, there are these beautiful maps. Occasionally I've been showing maps like these in this series. And I always see comments in the live chat. Who made that map? I've never seen that. Who made that? Hildebrand. And so we are going to get a full meal this morning with all of these beautiful visuals. So all I want to do on the chalkboard is emphasize that one of the main themes this morning is a major collision 100 million years ago. Now that sounds familiar, doesn't it? Batholiths has a hit and run model where there's a major hit of insular superterrane 100 million years ago, and then it runs up the coast. That's Baja BC, right? Between 85 and 55 million years ago. Well, Bob has a slightly different model, maybe a majorly different model, but the point is he also has this 100 million year old hit. The thing that's fascinating to me, and I did spend much of Thursday morning and much of Friday morning reading 2 major papers by Bob, recent papers, is that he's connecting dots with all sorts of individual papers, mapping projects, everything else, from Mexico up to Alaska. And our guest today is synthesizing so much data, incredible amounts of data. And he's following this previously unrecognized major 100 million year old hit. Bob calls it the Peninsula Ranges orogeny. An orogeny is a mountain building event. So this is the theme today for us. In case we get lost in the slides, I don't know if you'll get lost in the slides. I don't know if I'll get lost in the slides. It's going to be a lot. But keep in mind that we're all talking about this significant plate tectonic event, this significant slam of something that hit North America, or that North America hit. Again, that sounds familiar as well. That's all I want to say. So I'm going to the headphones. We're bringing Bob in, and we're going to hear directly from the master, assuming we can get this to work functionally for everyone. Okay, Bob, coming to you. We are going down to Tucson, Arizona to find a friend, and let's use this camera first and see if this works for us, Bob. How are you this morning, Bob?
Oh, I'm good. How are you?
Okay, I'm getting rid of that one. I'm going to try a different one. Hey, try this one, Bob. Good morning, Bob. How are you?
Good. Oh, I'm fine, thank you. How are you? This is my phone.
Doing great. Okay, this one is better, I think. If I boost your audio here, we don't have that reverb on this one. Are you still hearing the reverb?
No, everything's clear, but I kind of like reverb. I play guitar and I like a lot of reverb when I do surf music. So
there you go. There you go. Nice. Well, thank you for taking time to be with us this morning. I know your daughter's playing, was it softball, and you're going to head to the Diamond after this?
Yeah, I already took her across town this morning and dropped her off for her first game, and then she'll play 2 this afternoon. So I'll be back over there. But it's a little bit chilly. It's only supposed to be a high of 69, 70 today. So,
oh my God. All right. Okay. Oh my God.
Sorry.
You're laying on thick already. Well, that's life in Tucson, and we are jealous at the moment for sure. Well, I'm very excited about this, and I want to make sure that you know that what you're doing is just outstanding. Like, I just had a hell of a good time, Bob, the last 2 mornings reading this recent work. So thank you for that. I just had a great time.
Oh, I'm happy you did. You know, it's you never know how many people are going to read what you write, and you just hope that people will, and you'll hope that they'll be able to follow you.
Yes. Well, that's our goal to this morning, not only to kind of absorb all this, but try to follow you the best I can. And you have been watching our show, so you know who we are, you know the live audience, you know the questions that people have been asking. And so I'm optimistic that we'll be able to hang in there. And if not, we'll watch the replay a bunch more times and we'll get it.
Well,
Yeah.
You know, I thought the reason I decided to go with slides is because I thought you got a really good thing going here. And with slides, people can go back and look at them later. So
yes, exactly.
Today, some of the slides might fly by. I'm not going to worry about some items too much. We'll just fly by them, but they'll be there so people can go back and look at them and study them however they want. Most are versions that you'll find in my papers. You can go and dig out the papers, but most of these have been reworked somewhat for slide purposes.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that extra effort for that, by the way. So I got a couple quick comments to the viewers, and then we're going to bring your slides in, Bob. Viewers, I want you to know that we are going to have a live Q&A at the end here. So if you've got some questions, just kind of have them written down or whatever, and we'll get a chance to kind of go back and forth with Bob a little bit once we get through a bulk of these slides. Also, we're not doing the usual background with the guest and how did you get interested in geology and all that. There is an interview in the description right down below right now, and that link is in the description of an interview that I did with Bob when I visited him in Tucson about a year ago. So if you haven't yet, please watch that interview to get the backstory. But we're just going to jump right in with Hildebrand, and I think we're going to go for it, Bob. Let me bring these slides in and see what we're doing here. Oh, good Lord in heaven.
Well, you know, you show this Baja BC license plate, and I happen to have in my possession 2 of my favorite license plates. My own license plate, which is tectonics, and my friend from Hawaii, Michael Knight, who was a grad student or was an undergraduate with me at Santa Barbara, has the license plate magma.
Okay.
So, and these are 2 of my favorite things, and they're really the subject of the presentation today is how we can use magmatism to inform tectonics and how we can use tectonics to inform magmatism. And in the end, what we want to do is to be able to use this stuff you're going to get today to help us better understand the Baja BC story.
Okay.
So let's, I also want to mention that I really, really was pleased that you showed or had a show with Jane Wynn. She's one of my favorite people. We were graduate students together at Memorial starting in 1979 and were there 3 years. I think we were both at the same party where we had to kiss the cod as incoming Newfoundlanders. People coming to Newfoundland have to do. But she's one of my favorite people, and I just loved seeing her.
Wonderful.
And I should also mention that another, well, I'm sorry, but I want to mention that a friend of mine, and I probably should dedicate this talk to him because he died a week ago, Jason Salibi, who worked on the Sierra Nevadas, worked on the Coast Ranges batholith, and extremely knowledgeable. 3 of the students, George Garrels, Alan Chapman, and Mihai Duce are still extremely active in the field. And he had a great influence on me. He demonstrated my igneous class at Santa Barbara in 1972. So I just thought that I should mention and say how sad I am. And I hope we can get through this talk. So let's start right out with the talk. And here's a photograph of the north face. This is the north face of Half Dome, which is carved into the Half Dome granodiorite, and it's in Yosemite National Park. It's a place I like to go in Yosemite. It's a place called the Diving Board, and it just kind of drops off a few thousand feet to the bottom of the valley, and you can just sit there looking at the face of Half Dome. And so I thought that it would be nice to start. This is also the site of Ansel Adams' famous black and white photograph, The Monument. And I've always seen in color, so I don't take photographs in black and white normally. So we're going to talk today about what are known as Cordilleran batholiths, and these are giant magmatic masses. Here's a number of them, dominantly Cretaceous in the western North America. This is from a slide or an image by Scott Patterson. And these things are really complex. And here's a little snippet of a map I made of part of the Sierra Nevada batholith. And you can see there's a whole bunch of different colors here. And the various pastels and purples and pinks are different plutonic colors. And each one of these, even within the individual color, is complicated and has many pulses of magmatism. But you can see this probably have a pointer here. This blue-green color here, that's Paleozoic wall rock. And the brighter green here is Mesozoic wall rock. So originally, when workers started to look at the Sierra Nevada, they saw these older Paleozoic rocks over here, and they saw these Paleozoic rocks over here. And there was Mesozoic rocks in the middle, and they said, oh, a giant syncline. And that's what they did in the pre-plate tectonics days. They had a giant synclinorium, probably 70, 80 kilometers deep, in which rocks were melted because they got so hot and were there for so long. And this sort of continued until plate tectonics days. And then once plate tectonics came into vogue in the late 60s, people noted that California had what they called a subduction complex out, which was the Franciscan out by the coast. Then you went through Great Valley sedimentation, which they argued was deposited in a four-arc basin. And then people like Warren Hamilton would argue that the giant Cordilleran batholiths formed in an environment like the current-day Andes, where you had really thick crust. In other words, they continued this thick crustal idea. And they said, oh, you must form these batholiths beneath the current volcanoes. Well, we started, Sam Bowering, my longtime collaborator and I used a simple concept of isostasy. And some of you may not be familiar with this, so I'll just briefly mention it. All it is that continental crust on average is much less dense than the mantle. So it floats around on the mantle or the asthenosphere, but it's the mantle anyways. And just like icebergs, most of the stuff sinks down below sea level, but if you have really thick crust, it sits above sea level. In fact, the thicker the crust, the higher it stands. Mm-hmm. So if you have thin crust, it sits around sea level or even below sea level. Thick crust, you have mountains. That's really all you need to know about it. But so Sam and I noted that we looked around the world at all the continental arcs all over the whole world, and we found that may not be true. They're not so thick crusted. Here's Mount Rainier. Notice that it's right by the ocean. Its base level is at sea level. The Alaskan Peninsula, here's Augustine, right off of Anchorage in the water. In Kamchatka, huge downdrop blocks called Graben. Klutrevskoy, which is a 16,000-foot volcano, sits in these, and so do all the others. Again, right at sea level, no thick crust. Japan, again, stuff is at sea level, no really thick crust there. Taupo Zone in New Zealand, here's Mount Narahoe, which is also basically at sea level. The Guatemalan Nicaraguan Graben, again, sitting right at sea level. Vesuvius in Italy, again. And we could show, but we don't have room for the slide, the Hellenic Arc off of Greece. All of the modern arcs, except for the Andes, are sitting roughly at sea level. Individual volcanoes are high standing, but the base level says no thick crust. And we wrote a paper on this in 1984, and Kathy Busby was also in on that from her standpoint. She was working at that time in Mexico, and she developed the same kind of idea. So in the end, we looked at older arcs as well. And here's the coastal batholith of Peru. The black are wall rocks. They're volcanics and marine sediments, and the red are various types of plutons. This is sort of Cretaceous age. And the black over here is the Cosmo group. That's those volcanics and sediments, 5 to 9 kilometers thick. Marine, they were deformed at 100 million years and then intruded by the Coast-Plutonic complex. So here you have a case of an older arc system that was also deposited right at sea level. Then later, this complex, something like 80 million years ago, collided with the western part of South America. Mm-hmm. The point is that the crust was not thick. Mm-hmm. So in our book, using the Andes to inform you about the elevation of continental arcs would be like using Yao Ming to give you the average height of the Chinese population. Not going to work. So what does work? Arcs get thick crust beneath them when they collide with continents or other arcs, but mainly continents. So here's a photograph of the island of New Guinea. The north margin of Australia collided with the Melanesian arc at about 12 million years ago. And you have the arc terrain here in the back. It's mostly been eroded. And you have a 5 kilometer high fold and thrust belt, where rocks of the Australian margin were detached from the margin and piled up in a bunch of thrusts. Then these things were intruded, 4 or 5 million years ago, down to about 1 million years ago, by post-collisional intrusions. They're very rich in ore, things copper and gold. So people are after these kinds of things. They're very rich. Mm-hmm. So let's turn now to the Peninsula Ranges, which occur in southern U.S. and down into Baja. Here's a photo of from Baja of the Cardone. Cardone are about twice the height of saguaro cactus here in Tucson, so they're pretty.
Well, I keep going, Bob. We've lost your audio at the moment, but let's just keep. Okay. So, Bob, we cannot hear you at the moment. Oh boy, we have a runaway train on our hands. How can I get his attention? We can't hear you, Bob. I might have to, is he still going? Okay, I think Bob is still talking, and I can see, Bob, can you hear me? We can't hear you. I'm going to have to text Bob, try to get a message to him.
Northern terrains, but
this
terrain broke off from North America, as best we can tell, about 140 million years ago, and then collided again at about 100 million years. So this basin, or trough, or ocean, whatever you want to call it, was open for about 40 million years. To put it in perspective, the Sea of Japan has been open about 20 million years, and it's over 1,000 kilometers wide, and it's just started to close now. So it's roughly on that scale.
Hey, Bob.
To get the timing for how this thing, when this thing opened, the best we could do was the Klamath Mountains and the Sierra Nevada were together for a long period of time. They share a very common history throughout most of the Mesozoic. But about 140 million years ago, they split apart. And so we use that as our sort of best time for
You guys can't hear Bob, can
opening
you?
of this ocean basin, about 100.
Can you hear Bob?
So Michelangelo Martini in Mexico studied the detrital zircons, and he found that detrital zircons associated with the western Alessitos arc, the Santiago Peak arc on the west, and the Guerrero superterrane, had Guerrero superterrane detrital zircons. Stuff from the east had North American mainland, and they didn't mix. So the ocean was plenty wide, so that there was no mixing. Undoubtedly was floored by oceanic crust. And then at 100 million years, it closed, and the arc was thrust over Western North America. The only way you can do this, of course, is by westward subduction. So let's explore that possibility. First, the Alessitos volcanics on Guerrero superterrane were undoubtedly shallow marine. Here they're interbedded with all kinds of mudstones, limestones. Here's a big, thick, probably several 100-meter thick limestone. And then you have oyster encrusted cobbles and blocks and conglomerates and things like this. So it's very shallow marine, very typical from what we were talking about earlier. On the east side of the basin, you had a more typical passive margin sequence where you have a siliciclastic blanket spread over the rift facies, passing upwards into a west-facing carbonate platform, a big reef complex. If you go further north in North America, you'd find that this carbonate platform would die out and you'd have a clastic margin. But it's easiest to see where you have carbonates. So it sets up a scene like this. We've got westward subduction. We've got a carbonate platform, which is just almost middle Cretaceous exactly. And we've got a shallow marine arc over here on the west, which you call the Alessitos Santiago Peak arc. One of the things about carbonate platforms when they enter trenches during collisions is they bend upwards, because you can't flex the lithosphere like bending a piece of cardboard, like breaking a piece of cardboard. It flexes, so you get a little bit of uplift. And you see this really nicely with carbonate, because they go over the uplift, they get eroded, so there's an unconformity that develops, and then they get pulled down into the trench. And the first things you get are shallow carbonates, because of course the animals that make these limestones can grow really fast. So if the water's good, they grow really fast. And so, but they get buried very quickly here by mudstones and deep water sediments. So you're actually having to pull this slab down, pull the margin of North America down, gets buried in first shallow marine carbonates, then deep water sediments, and then ultimately what we call orogenic flysch in the trench itself. These are deposits of sandstone and shale, which are traveling longitudinally. They can travel for hundreds of kilometers in the trenches themselves. And they're important because, of course, they're full of detrital zircons. And here's the upper part of the Carbonate Bank on the North American platform, the eastern side, massive carbonate. Here's the unconformity here. And then you got some shallow water things. Note, this is only a couple meters. This is only 3 or 4 meters thick. Then you go up into mudstone, pelagic mudstone, and into this orogenic flysch, sandstone, interbedded sandstones and shale. So it conforms perfectly to what you'd expect to see. And some of you who've seen Game of Thrones will probably recognize this flysch from the site of Dragonstone. This, I think, was the ancestral home of Daenerys and her family, but they used these wonderful scenes from Zumai in Spain. This is a good example of flysch, interbedded sandstones and mudstones or shales. So at 100 million years, the west-facing carbonate platform of North America was pulled beneath the arc system out to the west. Here, as you can see, that there's same kinds of sediments on both sides, strengthening the idea that it rifted apart at about 140, and then was pulled beneath the arc terrain to the west. 100 million years. So we wanted to, Joe and I were both spent most of our careers working on, I should mention, that's Joe Whalen. He's been my collaborator on this Western U.S. stuff for years now. We both retired, and we both decided that we wanted to work together, although we were in the same division at the Geological Survey of Canada. And we never worked together because he worked in the Appalachians and I worked in the Northwest Territories. But when we retired, we decided to work on magmatism. So when you look at the magmatism in the Peninsula Ranges, you find that the magmatism can be divided into two basic parts: pre-100 million years and post-100 million years. Here's our 100 million year deformational event, our collisional event. And here's the colors are just represent different workers. So don't worry about that. All at 95% confidence levels for errors. And then we have some suites, which we gave different names just because they're located in different places, but they're all the same thing. That post-date 100 million years. The pre-100 million years are, of course, associated with subsidence and shallow marine volcanics and sedimentation, whereas those post-100 million years are more related to exhumation, uplift, and erosion. So here's just a quick slide to show you what the arc rocks would look like. This is from the fantastic map of Vicky Todd, and it shows the black metasedimentary and volcanic rocks intruded by the arc plutons here. They're all sitting unconformably on this blue Jurassic basement. The Jurassic basement is actually dipping to the northeast here. And so this whole panel is overturned, and these are all folded. So if you want to use paleomag, these are not good plutons to use for paleomag because they're all folded up. And you can see them. They're forming circular things here, but yet they go right around each other, and then the next one comes around and so forth. So, and you can actually map these out and understand that here's the roof of this purple one, and over here's the floor of the purple one. But at any rate, these rocks unconformably overlie Jurassic and intrude Jurassic. If you look at the younger, the post-100 million year rocks, they're a little bit less deformed. Most places completely undeformed. And you might be able to use some of these for paleomag. Here's the San Pedro de Martier complex, which is in Baja. This is done by Gordon Gastel and Dave Kimbrough. And these are age dates, 96, 94, so forth. And then the purple dots are samples for geochemical analysis. And these rocks are generally pretty different from the others. They don't have magnetite. They're ilmenite dominated rocks. And they have very nice, you can see them in hand specimen, titanite crystals. So we took a whole bunch of samples from all over Southern California, collected by previous workers, and also from Baja. And like I say, we divided them into different suites. Here's a myelinite zone. So we thought, well, it's probably safe to divide these out from these, at least initially, so we did that. The red are our pre-100 million year rocks, and these black and gray are post-100 million year rocks. These are the La Posta Suite, and these are what we called the Santa Ana Suite. So if you wanted to, we looked at a lot of chemistry, all the chemistry that was available. One of the things you'll note is that the pre-100 million year stuff is a huge suite. They're go from 40 some odd % silica up to almost 80% silica, whereas the post-collisional plutons shown here are much more narrow in composition. And you'll also note, for example, much higher strontium and lower yttrium. So what we did, we said, oh, look, we've got high strontium and low yttrium. Let's use that as a ratio, and it'll give us a really high number because these are high and these are low. We'll have a really high number for these, and these are all going to kind of fall in the middle. And so we should be able to differentiate the two suites geochemically, which we wanted to do because we hoped that people could use this elsewhere as well. So what we did is we made up a bunch of discrimination diagrams based on this kind of idea, and we found that the post-collisional 100 million year rocks could be pretty easily differentiated from the arc rocks. The green are volcanics, and the red are the plutons. And then we had some other older diagrams which we modified sort of empirically. In other words, I drew a line here. I said, oh, look, this line will separate these groups from this groups. And then later on, we did some mathematical treatments and so forth. But basically, this is what we did. And you can see, we can tell the difference pretty easily. So then we said, well, let's check it out. And so we looked at really young arc rocks, 1912 Novorupta Katmai eruptions, things like Avachinsky in Kamchatka in 1991. And then we compared that, a whole bunch of young arcs, with northern end of Taiwan, which had collapsed already and had some 200,000 year magmatism that we assumed to be post-collisional magmatism. In fact, it had to be. And so using really young rocks, we found out that, yeah, these discrimination diagrams seem to work pretty well. So we were buoyed by that, and we said, okay, let's go. And here we went. Here's almost 4,000 from all over the world, all over different ages. They range from 3.8 billion down to, a million or so years old. And we found that, lo and behold, there's this consistent difference. In almost any element or ratio that you look at, you'll find that they're different. And the interesting thing here is that the average continental crust sits in the middle. Every element sits in the middle. And so we thought this is wonderful, because for years, decades, people have thought that arc magmatism is what made continental crust. They didn't have any other mechanism for making continental crust than arc magmatism, but it's really difficult because arc magmatism is fundamentally basalt. And you got to get granodiorites. You got to get 62% rocks. But if you mix this and this, you can make continental crust pretty easily. So we think this is not only can we tell the difference between arc and post-collisional rocks, but we think that the two types of magmatism are what combine to make the bulk of continental crust.
Can you guys still hear Bob?
It's kind of an out thing. So when you have collisions, the continents are really buoyant, and the oceanic lithosphere is dense, and it's trying to subduct and go on its merry way down into the mantle. So what happens is you can pull the edge of the continent underneath the arc, and depending on how strong the join is, you can pull it deep, or maybe the join breaks at a shallower level. So, but it does break eventually. There's not just, you can't go to continental edges that are being subducted around the world or have been subducted and find slabs dangling there. They tear and they sink away into the mantle. And these are the kinds of things that Karen Siglock sees, are these slabs that have broken. Well, there's a whole bunch of things that happen. One, when the slab fails, you can get asthenosphere upwelling through the slab. And some people think you can get a whole bunch of magmatism when the asthenosphere upwells, but probably not these composition rocks that we see as post-collisional rocks, because upwelling asthenosphere gives you mid-oceanic ridge basalt. You see it all over the world, and that's what happens. That's what you get. So there has to be some other mechanism to create these post-collisional lavas. However, if this joint is really strong, this slab gets pulled down deeper. And of course, this area here gets metamorphosed. And you could go to present-day Norway and see very deep level, almost diamond-bearing crust. It was pulled so deep. And other origins, it's very shallow, such as over here. You get shallow breakoff. So our idea was that you melt the basalt and gabbro in the oceanic lithosphere. If you melt basalt and gabbro, you can get granodiorite, and that's what we see. So that's what we've gone with, and I'll show you some more information about this. But first, I wanted to show you what happens during slab breakoff. Here's a cross section across that New Guinea map from southwest to northeast that we were looking at. In other words, from the Australian Craton on the west, southwest, to the ocean in the northeast. Here's our arc. Ancient arc is up here. Here's our 5 kilometer high mountain range with those intrusions, the fold and thrust belt. But notice that 25 kilometers of debris have been eroded from the backside of this collisional origin. And this is because what happens when you have a collision and the slab tears, that lower piece of continental lithosphere is buoyant and it starts to rise. So it lifts up the whole collision zone, the hinterland of the origin, if you will. And so the arc generally gets eroded away. You don't see much arc. All this stuff goes off to the north because, of course, there's no way rivers and stuff can get through this 5 kilometer high mountain range in the front. So, but you have 25 kilometers of exhumation and erosion here within just a few million years. It's very rapid. The crust has been thickened, and it's just trying to get back to some equilibrium position, so it rises. Also, when it's rising, if you get out near the edge of it, you get a whole bunch of big reverse faults. These reverse faults here, like the Rosario thrust or the main Martier thrust here, these things have maybe 10, 15 kilometers of upward uplift on the faults itself, and you can see that the paleo pressures here are about 2 kilobars, and here they're about 6, up to 6. Just multiplied times 3 for an easy depth from kilobars. Not perfect, but it's a pretty good average. So these rocks were about 6 kilometers depths, and these were about 18. So these are pretty significant faults. And you can see down in the cross section, they're fairly steep. So these things come presumably from as the crust in the lower plate is lifted up, it just lifts everything above it, and you get these big normal faults. One of the things that happens when you get these big normal faults, I'm sorry for this slide, but I just didn't have the time to color it and make it look good. But this is from the work of Dave Kimbrough at San Diego State and other people. And what they found is when they look at Turonian sediments, which are 94 million year sediments, they're just full of 96, 97 million year detrital zircons. So what's happening is as the hinterland belt is uplifted after the slab fails, all this debris from these post-collisional plutons is being shed to the west, just like in New Guinea. It's in the back arc region. These are not forearcs. These are in the back arc region following the collision. The forearc is completely destroyed because, of course, it's on the other side of the arc and elevated and eroded. So here's the scene. Here's our pre-collisional scene, 130 to 100 million year arc. We might say 140 now, but roughly that. It collided with this west-facing platform. Subduction is clearly to the west. It's hard to get around it. And you have 2 suites of plutons, the deformed plutons, 130 to 100, then the 100 to 84 post-collisional plutons. Major uplift exhumation in the collision zone gives you a bunch of debris coming off to the back arc side. And of course, there's a typical fold and thrust belt out here, which formed on the trenchward side. So just to review, this basin formed at about 140. You had arc magmatism from 135 to 100. You've got post-collisional magmatism, 98 to 84, and then all this debris was shed off to the west as the hinterland or the collision zone was uplifted and eroded. Let's take a quick look at the Sierra Nevada, because the Sierra Nevada is is even a bigger whale than your whale. First, as a sidelight, this is the northern Sierra Nevada, and these are Jurassic rocks, 1, 2, and 3. And I show these just simply because people keep saying there's no westward subduction. You had long-lived eastward subduction beneath North America. But here's 3 different arc trains. Here's number 1, which is the Slate Creek, Lake Combi. Then you have the Smartville arc, and then you have the Mariposa arc. Notice that each of these have plutonic suites that span several different terrains. So they're clearly post-collisional suites, and the dates are up here. There's a 143 to 140, and it spreads over everything. So these are 3 different arc complexes. Arcs are always the upper plate because you have subduction beneath them. So during the Jurassic, 170, 160, 153, you had 3 arcs which collided with Western North America, or the Sierran block, if you will. They're all arcs. They're all the upper plate, and subduction had to be to the west. And if you looked at a block diagram, showing these. Here's the Slate Creek Combi, and then there's a whole bunch of these plutons that come in after. Then you've got the Smartville block, and it's got a whole bunch of plutons that come in after. And then the Mariposa, and it's got a whole bunch of these plutons that come in after. Unfortunately, nobody studied these plutons of late at all, but you know, they would certainly be good post-collisional slab breakoff type plutons. Anyways, I just wanted to point out that there's a long history of westward subduction in the Sierra Nevada. So I spent my first summer in the Sierra Nevada right about here, maybe 100, 200 yards from here. This is the Kuya, the middle fork of the Kuya River drainage. 1971, I spent a summer here. It's my first year in the Sierras and kind of fell in love with them, as most people do who go to the Sierras. And let's see. We see the same kinds of breakup in terms of plutons. In the west, you got these older pre-100 million year plutons. You have a good deformational event at 100. And then to the east, you have what's called the Sierran Crust Suite. And they're clearly post-collisional, ranging from, say, 99 down to about 84 million years. These post-collisional ones, again, just like the ones in the La Posta Suite, tend to form these big complexes. How the different plutons are related in them is controversial, but these aren't the only ones either. There's lots of other plutons around here that are post-100. These little browner things are the wall rocks, and these are the mainly out here in the west, you get pre-100 million year rocks. I wanted to focus in on this little area up here between the Sonoran complex and the Tuolumne complex, because it's pretty informative. Here you have 102 million year deformed and metamorphosed granite plutons. So in other words, the metamorphism and deformation were 102 and younger. You've got a whole bunch of volcanics ranging from basalt to rhyolite up here. They're folded and they're intercalated or interbedded with marine marbles. So, and they have a maximum depositional age of 103. So these rocks are shallow marine volcanics again, and they were deformed at roughly 100 million years, of course, because they're intruded by 96 million year pluton here and 94 million year plutons here. So we've got them bracketed, say, between 102 and 96. So this is the same event that we see down in the Peninsula Ranges. And these are the kinds of things you can discover when you really bear down and begin to study some of these areas. No thick crust at 100 million years. The crust got thick after 100 million years when the continent or the continental edge was emplaced underneath the arc. Chemistry, here's our Peninsula Ranges chemistry. Here's the Sierran chemistry. Looks about the same. You can see don't see them so well, but these purple triangles are the arc rocks and the blue are the post-collisional rocks. No real differences. And we did find another geochemical thing that was turned out to be pretty interesting. Samarium ytterbium. Guys working in Hawaii have realized that the samarium ytterbium ratio is a function of depth of melting. And we found that all the arc rocks, when you plotted them up on this kind of a plot, young arcs, these are all young, Aleutians, the Izubonin, you know, all these young things up here, along with the Peninsula Ranges, plutons and volcanics, all plot out here. The post-collisional, the post-100 million year rocks plot at higher samarium ytterbium ratios, and so we're deeper, derived from deeper levels. Not surprising, continental crust again sits right in the middle. But the important point is that these rocks were derived from deeper levels than arc rocks are derived from. And I'm not going to get into the weeds on that, but a woman named Emily Chin studied granulite facies, high-grade metamorphic quartzite xenoliths from this Miocene diaptreme that came up through the Sierra Nevada, and she found these zircons which had cores. They're paleoproterozoic cores, and those that have been following along know that these entered into a discussion between Paul Link and some of these guys and Will Matthews and others. But so I just thought I'd point out that we have them, that the Sierras has them as well. But the interesting thing about these is they're paleoproterozoic cores. They could only have been derived from the east. They can't have come from the west because those were all oceanic terrains and they wouldn't have Paleoproterozoic zircons. But the interesting thing is Emily Chin looked at the rims and found out that they, on average, were about 100 million years. So these rims grew around these Paleoproterozoic cores during the deformation and metamorphism of the Sierras in 100 million years. Important point here, they couldn't have come from the west, they had to come from the east. And at the very southern tip of the Sierra Nevada, just at the edge of the Mojave Desert, and I've rotated this, note the north arrow here. These are the San Emigdio Mountains, mapped by Alan Chapman and his supervisor, Jason Salibi. And what you see is this red is the San Emigdio schist, which is like the Orocopa Pelona, but older, or Swakane gneiss, it's also older. So these rocks are 9 to 11 kilobars, so think of them as 30 kilometer deep rocks. They're hot side up. They're 700 degrees C at the top, 590 at the bottom. And they have all these 130 down to 100 million year plutons and gneisses and things like that. Here's the antimony peak tonalite. It's got cores of 136 to 135, and then the rims are 103 to 99. These things are underplated by the schist, and then beneath that are these giant slabs. This is like 10 kilometers of Paleozoic sandstone and marbles and things like this. And they have detrital zircon compositions just like you'd find in Death Valley. In other words, these are pieces of North America underneath the Sierra Arc. And what you find is that these were all intruded by a post 100 million year pluton, which only formed at 3 kilobars, so about 9 kilometers, as opposed to 30. So this pluton, by 92 million years to 88, whenever it was intruded at that time, this area was rising like a cork. So you go from 30 to 9 within about 8 million years. So this is a place where you can actually see the suture between the base of the Sierra Nevada and Western North America. These rocks could not have been derived from the west. They have to have been derived from the east. So you can go north through Nevada and you find the same rocks here, heading on up through thrusts and so forth, same deal. You can go up into the Batholiths country. Here's the Western Idaho shear zone. These dark red bodies are the 98 to 87 million year plutons. And if you look on the left, you'll see they all look like post 100 million year plutons. So same story. We may talk about some of these younger ones on Wednesday, but by and large, you're going to see the same thing. You go to the Cascades. Cascades, here are these brick red things. These are let me move my phone here. This is the Mount Stewart batholith here. And then you have a number of others, the 10-peak, 7-fingered jack, black peak, and so forth. They're all post-collisional plutons. And here's the Methyle Basin. The western edge of the Methyle Basin is here. And this is work by Kathy Surplus, who looked at detrital zircons. Notice these big 116, 115 million year peaks, along with the older Jurassic basement. So this is a basin that is being fed during the pre-100 million year arc magmatism. And she analyzed mudstones from this basin, something that's not normally done, but she did it, and she got a good average analyses. And these things turn out to all look like arc rocks. So you can use sediments and even analyze them and still plot them on our diagrams, and they seem to work. And here's just a plot showing the 100 to 90 million year plutons that they're good slab failure-like compositions. Let's spend a couple minutes, not long, but just a couple minutes on the coast ranges. I don't know how people can work there. I'm always amazed that people get so much work done, because every time I've ever been there, it looks like this. And it's miserable from my standpoint. So the southern coast ranges is shown in this map here. The pink are Jurassic basement, and same with these blues and grays over here, all basement rocks. And the pre-100, the 140 to 100 million year plutons are shown in purple. All of these green rocks are 140 to 100 million year volcanics and sediments. There's shallow marine again, of course. There's no thick crust here at this time. And You'll note that these even sit on different terrains. This appears to be sitting on the Catawaller Wallader terrain, which are Permian rocks here. And then you have the post 100 million year plutons. They span everything. They're these brick red things. They span everything. So let's take a quick look around Harrison Lake, which has been mapped in great detail by many different people. And there you have 102 million year metadasites. And you have, here's a 107 to 101 million year pluton, 103 million year pluton. And then you have a whole bunch of things that are a little bit younger than 100 million years. This is the spasm that Jane Wynn used for paleomag here. And one of Will Matthews' students studied detrital zircons between here and here, he told me, and didn't find much difference. These rocks seem to be about the same, even though they're tremendously different grades. So this is an example where you have these big reverse faults at the western edge, juxtaposing big grades. And here's a good example of that. This from the work of Jim Monger and Ned Brown shows these big reverse faults, 35 kilometers depth, 10 kilometers depth. So 15 kilometers of movement. And I think that these represent the western edge of the subducted slab as it rises. One of the problems with this thing in the coast ranges is this basin opened up somewhere roughly right in through here. So you got all these little terrains. You got the Methow, the Spence's Bridge, the Bridge River. You got the Catawallader. You got a whole bunch of different things, and people get really confused by this. Here's our Nanaimo group over here in yellow, part of Wrangellia, and you kind of wonder, when this basin opened up, it opened up after the insular and intermontane terrains had already collided with North America. So it opened up, and it could well have had pieces of the intermontane terrain on the western block and left pieces of the insular terrain on the inside block.
This is excellent.
On the North American side. So, and this is just a schematic diagram. These are not meant to represent any particular small terrain or whatever, but it gives you an idea for what could have happened. This thing opened up, pieces of this end up here, pieces of this end up here. So when you close it again, it's a puzzle. You've got to work very carefully and try to understand. You may think, oh, look, here's an arc volcano. It's sitting on intermontane. Well, not so much. It's sitting on the western Peninsula Ranges composite terrain, which is made up of whatever was here that broke off at 140 million years. So this is also important to understand for paleomag, because if you measure arc rocks out here and this thing was sitting, say, 100, 200 kilometers, 500 kilometers further south, then it'll give you a different paleopole than something over here. When you close it up again, you may not even know. So there's a lot more work that needs to be done on some of these small terrains before we can reach a really good and robust solution. If you go to the north a little bit farther, you go up into what's called the Gravina Trough, shown here in yellow. But I wanted to point out, north of the Nanaimo group, you have Haida Gwaii, which is here, and it has the Queen Charlotte group on it. And if you look at the Queen Charlotte group, detrital zircons, again by one of Will Matthews' students.
Thank you.
They looked at detrital zircons and they found, oh, look, you got predominantly Jurassic basement here. And as you go up through the section, you get to 101 million years, and you get dominantly stuff between 130 and 100. By the time you get to 100, you're starting to get a little bit of stuff coming over 100. By the time you get to 91, it's just saturated with these post-collisional plutons. So this is a complete de-roofing sequence following the collision. These faults over here are, again, high-angle reverse faults. They juxtapose rocks of really high grade over much lower grade rocks to the west. This is the Gravina Basin tipped up on its side. Here it is here with these post-collisional plutons in red, and these are older rocks, insular terrain rocks out to the west. And again, the detrital zircons from this little block here, which is the eastern block, and these western ones are completely different. Well, not completely different, but pretty different. And you have these big reverse faults juxtaposing the grade Again, here's one of the big tonalite sills, the Coast Plutonic Complex here. So here's the work of Jokelson, looked at the detrital zircons. Here's the Douglas Island volcanics. They range from sort of lower, they were lower Cretaceous. They have 105 million year Julian diorite, which intrudes it. Then the Treadwell is also full of volcanic rocks. And down at the base, you have uppermost Jurassic. Here's the eastern face, these slightly older rocks. But again, pretty clearly volcanics, shallow marine, again, with these giant reverse faults. Nothing very different, pretty much the same story. We've been pushing same age rocks, 140 to 100 million years. Note, just as a warning, this is 118 million year detrital zircons, but note it has to be younger than 105, as there's a big unconformity here with conglomerate that contains class of the Julian diorite. So, overview of the Coast Plutonic Complex from George Garrels. And I've sort of doctored it up, but I use his cross sections. Here's the collapsed basin, big reverse faults here. Notice that the arc rocks, the 120 million to 100 million year arc rocks, are all to the west, here and here. The post 100, the 100 to 80 span the whole cross section from west block to east block. Note that it changes slightly. Stikini is involved here, but it's mainly a bit of Yukon Tanana and Rangelia to the west. But the important point here, post 100 million year rocks span the collision, and the pre 100 million year rocks are on the west. Again, so this is westward subduction. The arc is here in the west. The platform would have been on the east. Just quick shot to show that the plutons there, the right age plutons, have the kinds of, they plot where you'd expect them to plot. So, looking at the detrital zircons, if you look at the Eastern Great Valley Group by the Sierras, which is supposed to be 4 arc rocks, they contain lots of post 100 million year rocks. Here's the Valle, which are those rocks off of Baja. They're full of 96 million years. Alaska has the McHugh Creek, which we'll look at in just a second, just for a minute, has 96. And the Nanaimo group, full of 87 and 92. And it's got another collision, which we'll talk about on Wednesday. And so it's got these 73, 75 million year peaks. And then we haven't discussed them, and I don't expect anybody to know them, but the Ochoco Basin and the Hornbrook Formation also contain these post 100 million year detrital zircons. The Selwyn Basin, which is here's our Yukon Tanana terrain, here's Alaska, boundary comes through here, here's Anchorage, and Selwyn Basin is just full of these post 100 million year plutons. The thrusts are 100 million years, and these plutons clearly cut the thrusts. Just a quick shot to show you that they look mostly like slab failure plutons. And the last bit we'll see is what's known as the Kahiltna Basin. Some people think the Nahotsan and Desidayash basins are part of the same deal, but they're not. They're older. So let's look at the Kahiltna up here in Alaska. And first, let's look at Alaska. It's a pretty scenic place. I enjoy it, although the weather stinks. Anyways, here's Rangelia composite terrain here. Here's the Jurassic Talkeetna Arc, which was emplaced over the top of the Rangelia composite terrain. This is the collision that Karen Siglock was talking about, the sort of 167 collision between the Talkeetna Arc and the Rangelia composite terrain, which formed during the collision of Rangelia and the Peninsula terrain here. Here's the McHugh complex here, which are post 100 million year detrital zircons, and the Kahiltna Basin formed between the Yukon composite terrain and Rangelia here. The model that Siglock used is probably correct, and the Pavlis one is backwards in our book, but they couldn't discuss the Kahiltna Basin and the younger collision, which is, of course, 100 million years, because they had already closed the basin. They don't have a new basin opening up. So the arc rocks here, let me go back, sit on Rangelia. They're here as CA. They sit on top of the Nizozan Basin, which was deformed and metamorphosed prior to 133 million years, which is the oldest rocks preserved here. Here's the arc rocks here and here. Plot up as good arc rocks. They go down close to 100 million years. And a recent paper, a couple of years ago, the one that was discussed by Karen Siglock, the statement that and I'll read this to you just because it's an important statement. We argue from a Northern Cordilleran perspective that some recent syntheses, e.g. Johnston, that's Steve Johnston, who you saw last week, Hildebrand, that would be me, and Siglock and Mihalnik, who you also saw last week, ignored or dismissed a fundamental observation, namely that there is compelling geological evidence that subduction along the Northern Cordilleran margin has been east-dipping for at least the last 125 million years. Well, we're not really sure what this evidence is, but one of the things that they argue about is that there was an accretionary complex on the southern side of Rangelia. But when you actually look, it's not, this is their own figure. It's eroded. There is no accretionary complex there. And after the 167 collision in the Jurassic, you have again this Potter Creek assemblage. These are debris from the collision itself. And then after the 100 million year collision, which they agree is at 100 million years, you have again these post-collisional sediments deposited. This is the McHugh complex. So this is exactly like everything we've been following all the way along from Baja all the way northward. There's really no fundamental difference. The 100 million year is clearly west dipping. The Yukon Tanana is the high-grade terrain. It's the one that was pulled beneath Rangelia. And so their model looks like this. They want to collide this arc, the Chisana arc, which is the one we were just looking at, underneath the high-grade Yukon Tanana terrain. But Yukon Tanana doesn't even have an arc of that age. And they want to have it come from all the way out here. But there's no accretionary prism here. It doesn't exist. It's phantom. Our solution, simply subduct the Yukon Tanana, which becomes high-grade, or if it's high-grade and becomes even more high-grade, beneath the arc. And then once you've had the collision, you get this debris shed off to the other side, which is the McHugh post-collisional basin full of younger than 100 million year detrital zircons. So overall, the 100 million year Peninsula Range orogenies represents the closure of marginal basin that was open for something like 40 million years. It extended from Mexico to Alaska, and it closed by westerly subduction. One of the more interesting things that came out of this study was that at 100 million years, tyrannosaurs, pachycephalosaurs, snakes, anosid turtles, and a whole bunch of marsupials arrived in North America. And in fact, from 100 million years down to the demise of dinosaurs at 65, these dinosaurs apparently wiped out all the other existing dinosaur clades and took over North America. So it's turned out to be an interesting study. These dinosaurs arrived on the Peninsula Ranges terrain, and when it docked with North America, they were able to spread throughout North America. So Sierra paradigm, Franciscan, Great Valley, North America, thick arc, probably not. We like this kind of a scenario, westwardly dipping subduction beneath the shallow marine arc, carbonate platform on western North America, leading to a collision where all the arc rocks are deformed. Post-collisional and plutons are coming from the melting of the slab as it sinks away. You get a folded thrust belt, and you get this back arc molasse with a whole bunch of reverse faults associated with it. If you look at a map of it, here's the Peninsula Ranges block coming in. There was another block that came in at about 124 million years.
Important.
And collided with North America. How it related exactly to the Peninsula Ranges is unclear, but it also seems to have been was an arc arriving from the west at 124. Now we've got another one arriving at 100 million years.
He's got two ribbon continents.
So as best we can tell, we look at our arcs in the Sierra Nevada that we showed little pieces of. They all seem to be westerly subduction. This 124 million year one is also westerly subduction, and the Peninsula Ranges composite in the Peninsula Range orogeny also appears to be westward subduction. So we'll leave the laramide till next time. But that's really all I have to say about these rocks right now. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but where are we at time-wise? Are we over the limit? Are we over the limit? We done?
We are done, and I'm confident you cannot hear me right now, Bob. So I am going to hide the screen, hide your slides, and I am also going to mute Bob for just a bit. So I am trying to get the message to Bob that he cannot hear me, but we can hear him perfectly. So I think I'm just going to keep talking. And he's not going to be able to see me until he removes, it closes his slides from his computer. So I really enjoyed that. It looks like we still have more than 900, so you didn't all bail. The slides were outstanding, and I'm going to unmute Bob and see if he can hear me now. Bob, can you hear me? All right, so I'm just going to keep talking for a few minutes. We'll try to get him back. My other approach is I'm just going to kick him off entirely, and he'll find the live stream and kind of rejoin us, I guess, just with his photo, just with his video, in other words. I'm going to try this in case you can see it. Bob, on your computer, we can see and we can hear you. But you can't hear me, right? Your phone crashed, but your computer is working and camera and slides.
I can't hear you.
Now we can hear you, and can you hear me? We'll try this again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, can you hear me? That's the problem. You cannot hear me. Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, I just switched to my other computer.
That's the problem. Okay.
Hold on.
We got.
Yeah, I just switched to my other computer.
Okay.
Hold on.
We got. You need to
Can you hear
mute
me
one
now?
of your. You need to mute one of your two windows.
Okay, here's my phone. I'll just shut off the phone.
Yeah, we'll figure this out.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you for sure. We've been able to hear you the whole time. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can see.
Good.
I've got a visual of you up on my main computer, and I can hear you through the computer with the slides.
Good. And I'm hiding your slides at the moment, so we are just seeing our two heads. Are you able to just see our two heads?
Oh yeah, on the computer I can see it here. Yeah.
Good. Well, let's just focus on that. Let's get off the slides for just a second. So I got a bunch of things to say. First of all, thank you. Those slides were excellent. There was a lot of detail there, obviously, but it was wonderful, and we got almost all of it. Your phone crashed early on, and so we were able to I didn't think anybody could hear you for a while, just for like a minute, I think. And then I realized that everything was perfect except you could not hear me. So are we still functional? Are you still able to hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, good. So, I mean, come on, man. That was like perfect on your end. Like, you know, it's like talking to you on the phone. Like you get rolling, and it doesn't matter if I say anything or not. Like that was just ideal.
Well, you know, I wanted people to understand that everything's pretty much the same up and down the Cordillera. And you know, the problem is the geography can be overwhelming.
Yes. Well, I've got, so viewers, we're going to come to you in about 5 minutes, but I think I want to do just a couple clarifying things with you, Bob, based on what I think I get at the moment.
Yeah.
Do you have more than one ribbon continent that we are colliding with?
Well, yeah, I think that there are probably more.
Okay.
There's two that, you know, you can see. There's the one that collided during the severe at 124, and that's that it doesn't occur in Mexico, and it doesn't occur in the far northern Canada. It seems to only occur in the sort of middle region, and that will become important tomorrow or Wednesday.
Yes. Okay.
During our talk about Wednesday, but sure. And the question is, these terrains, how long are they, and how amalgamated are they?
Oh boy. Now you're frozen. We'll hope that you unfreeze yourself. You're still frozen. Oh God, look at that shot of you. All right. Oh, you're recovering. You're recovering. Let's see. One more. You're still frozen again. How about you? We're better now. Yeah, I don't know if you want to switch to your phone, if we felt like the connection with your phone's better, but let's not. Let's just hope that you're not frozen at the moment, I don't think. So let's go to the viewers. Yeah, I think so. Okay. Viewers, let's go to you before we might have other problems. Yeah, you're buffering right now, but we're fine. Viewers, uppercase, please. We'll try to get some of your questions to Bob, and I'm hoping this can be semi-rapid fire. We'll see. Okay, so Bob, Thomas Thomas says, can you explain and go over the slab failure portion again? What do you mean by slab failure, Bob?
Well, what happens when you have a collision, the leading edge of the continental margin gets pulled beneath the arc by the oceanic lithosphere, which is dense and trying to sink. And so it falls away into the mantle, but it's pulling the leading edge of the continent with it. But the continent is buoyant. Try swimming sometime and taking a basketball and pushing it down. You're not going to get very far. It's going to pop back up. Well, continental crust is the same way, but yet the oceanic slab is trying to fall away. So it basically separates, tears away. And so you're left with two pieces. The continent, once it's torn, will rise, and the oceanic lithosphere is going to sink. As the oceanic lithosphere sinks, the basalts, the gap melt, rise up.
You're buffering severely at the moment. Maybe let's have you, I'm going to kick you out, Bob, and have you rejoin us with that link, however you want to do it, with your computer or your phone, but let's just try that. I'm kicking you off. Rejoin us, would you please, Bob, in just a sec. All right, man. I mean, I told you the format was going to be different. I didn't expect to have our speaker go for whatever that was, 50 minutes, without even realizing that he couldn't hear us. But I hope that you can appreciate the energy and the dedication. I think some of those slides were made specifically for us. I'm not sure. But some of those towards the end I had not seen before, especially the part where you're having a collision and then you break the collision apart again and take scraps of intermontane with insular and scraps of insular that stay with intermontane. To me, that's a key thing. Let's bring the big fella in one more time. Let's see if this is any better.
Am I here?
Bob? Yeah, you are. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you great.
Okay, good. More questions, please. We need the viewers to ask. There was one with slightly, let's see. Okay, Bob. Clayton says, in 3 sentences, can you do this in 3 sentences? What is the evidence for westward subduction?
Yes, arcs were located in the western block. And therefore the passive margin gets subducted beneath the arc westwardly.
We lost you in the second sentence. So you've got arc on, try it one more time. I think we've got you now.
Arcs are on the western block.
Yep.
passive margin, which is west facing on the eastern block.
Yep.
The subduction is to the west beneath the arc. So the passive margin is subducted to the west beneath the arc.
Beautifully done. Thank you. I'm going to scroll down to live, try to grab a few more. I don't know why we're suddenly having all sorts of trouble with you, Bob. You were perfect that whole slideshow with audio. You weren't freezing at all. So something's going on. Doesn't matter.
Well, sometimes where I live, it's kind of on the outskirts. You know what? You've been here.
Yeah, I've been here. Oh yeah.
It's I mean, people are crazy. They could hit a telephone pole. There could be Cox is doing some service. There's any number of reasons. We have intermittent internet.
Okay.
Yes.
Next question, but you're still garbled. You want to try your phone? I'm going to kick you out. We'll try one more time. We'll have you join us with your phone. See if that's any better. Goodbye with your computer. All right. I got one. Chris, I've got yours dialed up here. And I'm going to come down to live after I ask Chris's. And thank you, viewers. You know that we're going to do specific Baja BC stuff on Wednesday. I'm seeing that most of you are understanding that. And so I appreciate your kind of discipline, I guess, to stay away from some of the Baja BC questions. It's all gravy from here. We got what we wanted to get from Bob and then some. And yeah, I've got a laptop. I want to show you the papers that Bob made sure to put up for you. And I have got a few. I've got a few of Bob's illustrations that I think I want to narrate on. Now he can't even join us with his phone, so we may not get him back. Let's spend a couple minutes with Bijou. Waiting for Bob Hildebrand from Tucson, Arizona. Well, if we don't get Hildebrand, we don't get him. We're going to wait another 5 minutes. Maybe I'll switch to, I'll wait one more minute. I'm going to ask a couple of questions just for the record, I guess. Oh, here's Bob.
Am I back?
We got you. I think this might be the way to go. Can you hear me?
Okay. I can hear you.
Good. All right. So Chris wonders, can you please help explain how the Blue Mountains in Oregon fit into this? Ophiolites and 140-ish million plutons.
I can. I'd rather do that on Wednesday.
That's good. That's good. Yep.
Because that's sort of a thing we'll be coming to on Wednesday. But the Blue Mountains has a 160 million year Jurassic collision.
Okay.
And then there's a something that's around 140, maybe just slightly older. And that's kind of the same age as things you find in the westernmost Klamaths. And
Okay.
two little sections of that I mentioned in Canada, the Desideiash and the ocean basins. But the important thing about the Blue Mountains is that they were joined with a belt at 100 million years.
You're still funky. So I'm going to try one more, and if we have more troubles.
It's the internet connection, I guess.
Okay. Emmy asks, what is a hinterland, please?
It's the central core to the origin. It's they used to call it an orthotectonic zone, but it's the central core where the metamorphism and deformation takes place in an origin. The external zones would be outside. They'd be the thrust belts and basins that are forming on the outside. But the hinterland is the core region.
Thank you. I'm looking for just a couple more, but I think we're pushing our luck with the internet. I mean, for some reason, it was flawless for your entire talk, which I'm grateful for. If we had problems then, that would have been a real problem because those slides were just so good. Medieval Creatures asks, could you explain how you view the Western Interior Seaway fitting into this?
Oh yeah. Well, I just wrote a whole paper on it. Paper number
Yeah.
3 in the Canadian Journal of Earth Sciences, and it's the longest of the 3. But let me just say that it fits in really well, and you should take a look at that CJES paper 3. Just look at the figures. That's enough, or read the conclusions, and you'll get the gist of it. There's a lot of stratigraphic detail in there that's unnecessary for the general reader.
I after we're done with you, and that's coming in just a sec, Bob, I'm going to go to my laptop and I'll show them that paper as well as a few others that you made sure to make public for this talk. I think I'm going to ask the last question. Your maps are so gorgeous. What is your process? Are you doing all this at your house with what programs are you using? How are you creating these amazing maps?
Tyrannosaurus Rex arrived at 100 million years, by the way. I can see the questions. Anyways, I just do them. That Tyrannosaurus was Fred. By
You're
the way,
sidetracked now, Bob. Come on.
yeah, sorry. That's my ADHD. I'm like the squirrel.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah, I just make them in Adobe Illustrator.
Wow.
There's nothing fancy about them. In fact, I keep a really old computer around that I use an old, probably 2012 system on, just so I don't have to rent Adobe Illustrator.
Well, I'm not going to give up with that. I mean, everybody's got Illustrator. So why are you making such distinctive looking maps? Like, how are you deciding how to put those together? Color choice and everything else, like they just stand out. You can see them immediately and know they're yours. What goes into your choices, I guess?
I don't know. Have you looked at my photographs? That's what I do. I don't know where it comes from or how it comes. I just sit there and look at it, and this is what comes out. Now, let me say my process is that I make these maps so that I can firmly ingrain the geology and the geography in my head. The best way for me, say I haven't mapped in an area, but say I want to understand an area. I've never mapped, even though I've been to the area of where Basel is, the Helen, the Idaho Bathel. I've been there several times. I still don't know all the detailed geology, but if I make a map of it, if I make a detailed map that shows everything, it gets fixed in my head. That's just the way my brain seems to work, and that's why I wanted to show these maps to people, because I think at least, people can get a better idea of geography and how things fit together, I think, with a map. And that's just me. Now, everybody in the world tells me that women don't do that. They navigate by signposts. So they'll go to somewhere and they'll navigate in a different way than men will. It seems to be one of the fundamental differences. I don't know how real it is or it isn't, but my wife can't use my maps.
Okay.
Well, nor does she care about them, quite frankly.
Well, we can read those maps. We can see the power of those maps. And yes, I can relate to your comment. I mean, it's almost like taking notes. Like if I'm just passively reading something, it doesn't work for me. I have to graphically get it down somehow. And you're obviously doing it in a much more elaborate manner. But that really does speak to me. The fact that you're just using color, you're using places, you're seeing map patterns on such a grand scale. I think my last question to you, now that your internet has finally settled down, where is your suture then in the lower 48 states between ribbon continent material and old North America? Like I did with Stephen, can you give us some places that we would recognize where we can go find your suture?
Well, yeah, in the Peninsula Ranges, you can find it really easily because you have a carbonate platform. And so going through most of Mexico, you can find it where that carbonate platform is overthrust.
Okay, but that's not going to make any sense to me. I don't know any Mexican geography. How about the lower 48?
Well, you can, don't forget, let me make a side thing that during collision, what happens is that slices of the passive margin sedimentary pile get sliced off. They get detached from the lower plate and they're accreted to the upper plate. As soon as that piece becomes the upper plate, the suture steps forward to the front of that thing, because now that's the upper plate. And so you get a whole thrust belt that's built up, and the leading thrust is technically the front of the upper plate and is the last suture. So the suture migrates as a function of time. Now, if you can go all the way back to the oldest thrust, that would be where the suture. Now, that's probably in Nevada, the looning fence maker thrust, which is a 100 million year structure that seems to separate all the arc rocks from North American rocks to the east. Now, formerly, everybody said, oh, that's a Jurassic suture, but no, it looks like it's a 100 million year fault. So the looning fence maker thrust going up through Nevada is actually probably the closest thing around that we could find. Where it goes, it's hard to find it in the U.S. because you have this basin and range extension. You have all this magmatism. You got all this stuff colliding it. And then you've got, 3 or 4 of these terrains have collided. And every time you collide, you get a thrust belt. And then basins open up. So something opens up and then later it closes. So it really is a complicated puzzle, which is why I started with the Cretaceous. There's a really rich Jurassic history, but nobody's really gotten at it very well yet because you have to understand the Cretaceous first.
Well, I'm super helpful. I understand it's complicated. I'm being kind of stubborn now, I guess, but I'm approaching from old North America's side, like I was doing with Stephen, okay, Edmonton, Alberta, we know that's old North America. Not even you guys are saying Edmonton, Alberta is built on old North America, right?
Yep.
Okay. And so as we approach, if we're watching a sunset and we're at Edmonton, Alberta, or we're in Omaha, Nebraska, or if we're in New Mexico someplace, and we're starting to walk west, so one place would be Central Nevada, where I finally leave old North America and I'm into something that has to be part of these ribbon continent accretions.
Well, there's rocks that were collided in the Great Basin area, and those rocks you'd find the collision zone is in central Utah. It's at the hinterland, the edge of the passive margin of North America. However, those rocks are all now in Canada, because that's the whole deal with everything moving to the north. So you're juxtaposing rocks in the Nevada that were probably down in Mexico.
Yeah.
So to just go and put your finger on something, I can tell you where to go in some places in Mexico and Nevada. I can't really tell you in Canada because you have these big strike slip faults that have moved everything to the north.
Wow.
So
okay.
The belt rocks probably were originally, despite Paul Link saying I didn't say this, but they probably were joined to Western North America down in the south at one time, and they migrated to the north. So now you see them juxtaposed, but it's a younger juxtaposition. But that's the contact between the Lewis thrust between the belt and North America is clearly a major suture zone. When did it form? 50 million years ago it formed. But those rocks came from the south. So it's not so straightforward as people are asking. One thing, somebody asked a question of why not 101, 99? Maybe. 100 million years is everything's just, we got big errors on these things. So you're talking 1 or 2 million years on our age dating systems. So it could be 99, could be 101. That's one of the problems. People say, oh, is this thing happen all up and down the margin at the same time? Maybe, maybe not. There's some leeway in the precision of our analyses.
Well, that is a perfect springboard to Wednesday, and I think I have a request for you. I'm wondering if we can do on Wednesday, if we can cut your slides down to half the time you had today, because I do think you right now, Bob. I think that's a big part of this, and I want to do more of this.
I don't have hardly any slides for next week.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm going to hold it to like 300 or 400. No, I'm just kidding. I know I don't have many slides for Wednesday at all. I want to give people a chance to interact, and you know, I don't want to take it away, as I like the way you're doing the whole thing, and but I felt that there should be some background to understanding these things, because without the whole thing about arc and slab failure, magmatism, it's going to be hard to explain when I come to say, I'm not going to say, oh, slab failure and arc magmatism, yada, yada, yada. Right. It's not going to make a lot of sense.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you so much for this morning. And I'm going to do a little bit more with my laptop, but I appreciate your time and your energy. And I'm glad the majority of the slides worked beautifully. And we'll look forward to seeing you again on Wednesday this week.
Yep,
okay.
I'm going to head out to the softball field and enjoy my daughter in a couple of softball games for the afternoon. So
sounds good. Okay. Thank you,
Bob.
Guys.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Bye.
Well, I mean, he's a character, and if nothing else, I'm more and more confident every show when there's stuff like this that happens. I mean, that was a first, obviously, but we made it work. And yeah, I was watching the live chat for most of that, kind of seeing some of you had some specific suggestions, so thank you for that. We have a few minutes. We don't really, but I do feel like I want to go to the laptop and do a little bit there. We still have more than 850 with us. So let's spend a few more minutes together before we say goodbye. So switch over to the laptop, please. Screensaver. Wow, okay. Yes, going to nickzentner.com, it looks like this. You click on Baja in the upper right-hand corner, it looks like that. So out of this just stunning number of pages, I mean, if somebody just counted how many pages we're talking about and how many maps and how many everything from Hildebrand, we would be totally slammed. But instead, by email, I said, Bob, what are we going to call this show, and which papers do you want to share for your Saturday morning show? So he picked these 4. You're like, oh, okay, well, that's not that big a deal. Well, this is Hildebrand, a new slant part 1, a new slant part 2, and a new slant part 3. Parts 1 and 2 came out in 2021. Part 3 just came out last month. And so he's put them all together. I don't know why they look small like this. This is what Bob sent to me, or gave me. So here's the mid-Cretaceous Peninsula Ranges orogeny. Remember, that's the big hit 100 million years ago. A new slant on Cordilleran tectonics, part 1, Mexico to Nevada. I mean, this is 120 pages, part 2 and part 3, So part 3 was the Western Interior Seaway business. So I did most of my reading recently out of this brand new slant stuff. If we then go here, 119 pages of this thing from 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I guess now. And this is a bit of a masterpiece, I must say. That's one of the bound things I was showing in front at the beginning of the program, in other words. This one I looked at very quickly, didn't read it carefully. Back in the Precambrian, kind of getting the idea of slab failure with Bob and Joe and Sam Bowering. If that name sounds familiar, that's Michael Eddy's PhD advisor from MIT. And then an earlier version of Bob's ideas are in this, but there's different volumes of this thing as well in this Paul Hoffman series. And again, here's these classic images all through. So there'll be I think 4 more papers waiting for you for Wednesday's show. So again, this guy is just incredibly prolific. What I'd like to try here, let me switch to the other camera. I saw some of you saying, you know, maybe I can, you know, condense everything or somehow summarize or bring out the big things. I don't want to do that. First of all, because the length of the program. Second of all, because it was Bob's show today. But maybe a slight version of what was requested by some of you. In other words, me trying to translate some of what we just experienced, is me going to a few images that are new to me. Bijou and I were looking at these this morning at the breakfast table, and I just grabbed a bunch of them. I'm going to hide myself even here. I'm going to get to slides only. And this is from one of those papers. And I really like it. I hadn't seen it till this morning. So for the person or two of you who asked, what is slab failure? This is the concept of colliding 2 major pieces of crust and trying to subduct one of the pieces, but it's material that doesn't want to go down. So this oceanic crust, which is part of the former ocean floor, is going to be pulled down into the mantle due to gravity, and we're going to break this thing off. So slab failure looks like this. And for me, eating my Wheaties this morning, I'm like, well, this is the wrong look. So I spent a little time with Bijou this morning flipping everything around because Bob is emphasizing westward subduction. So this is slab failure 100 million years ago, where this is the ribbon continent, the big one. According to Basil, it's insular. According to others, it's not. But here comes North America into fixed ribbon. Get the leading edge of the west-facing passive margin sediments and other things colliding. This stuff doesn't want to go down the tubes. So we pinch off this thing. Here goes the ocean slab sinking and eventually becoming ribbon candy. And this says rising melt, you know, rising melt. So we're generating magmas. We're generating magmas up through this severed slab. That's the concept. And I think we need more animations or more kind of dwellings on this. Because if you didn't catch it, back to the other camera, I guess I am feeling like I want to come back and clarify a couple things. As far as I can tell, up until Bob Hildebrand, pretty much everybody in geology is looking at all these plutons from Alaska to Mexico or from Mexico up to Alaska as being from subduction. It's like, we're not even questioning it. It's subduction. And those are called arc magmas. So if you subduct an ocean plate, you generate magmas, you have the magmas rise, it becomes a line of volcanoes, that's an arc. So arc magmas are from general gradual subduction. Whether it's eastward or westward, it's subduction creating a line of volcanoes. That's an arc magmas. But this thing we're looking at here is not that. This thing we're looking at here is not arc magmas. It's not subduction magmas, quote unquote. Instead, we're generating a bunch of magmas right here and having those magmas come up through the crust when we break the slab, when we fail the slab, when we pinch this thing off and allow this surge of mantle to come to the surface. And that was one of the main messages of the slideshow. I don't know, did you catch it or not? Like, it's best on display in Mexico and Southern California in the Peninsula Ranges batholith. The western half of the Peninsula Ranges batholith is old pluton material compared to the eastern half, And Bob's saying the western half of the Peninsula Ranges batholith is arc material from westward subduction, making a line of volcanoes on the Ribbon continent. That's the western half of the Peninsula Ranges batholith. The eastern half are magmas that came up after the collision from slab failure, because the ocean crust is gone. We can't continue to just do general subduction and making arc magmas because there's no ocean crust to melt anymore. There's no ocean crust to subduct anymore. It's just finding the right visuals and it's finding the right visuals to continue that narrative. And I don't know, in this series or maybe later, I don't know, we'll get into that a little bit more. So Bob showed this, but I've enlarged these now for us. I don't know if this is helpful to you or not. I'm going to try. So here is Ribbon continent out in the water. Here comes North America approaching. Now, this is Karin and Mitch now, right? They want a fixed Ribbon continent. And we're going to get rid of this ocean crust by westwardly subducting it beneath. So these are arc magmas. There's no slab failure magmas in this picture because there's no reason to fail the slab yet. But when we finally collide things, here's what I mean. The western half of the batholith in Mexico is old stuff, that's arc. The eastern half of the Peninsula Ranges batholith in Mexico is younger stuff, that's the slab failure magmas. And we're seeing, Bob is seeing the same two different kinds of magmas in the Sierra Nevada, two different kinds of magmas in the Coast Range, the CPC up in Alaska, in British Columbia, etc. Okay, I'm just going to try a couple more things. I'm feeling almost like I'm ramping up into a whole new talk. I don't mean to do that, but this is one of the few maps that I've seen of Hildebrand's where he says, here is the suture, right here. 100 million year old Guerrero suture. And you remember when I asked Bob, like, where can I put my finger on this suture between all this ribbon stuff that's complicated and old North America? He said, well, I have it in Mexico. He's got it here, and he's got it here, and he's got it here. And it would be nice if we could see a map of the lower 48 where Bob has a line like this coming through, so that just as a U.S. citizen, as I'm teaching, and I know the geography here the best, better than other places, that's what I mean, better than Mexico for sure, better than Canada, I want to see that. And you heard Bob's answer. It's not that easy because there's all these complications. However, out of all the maps I've seen by Hildebrand, and this one's crazy, I'm going to finish with this in case you're running out of time here. I'm going to finish with this. Again, I did this morning with Bijou, and I'm going to enlarge this and look carefully. What am I doing to wrap up this show? I'm pushing things. This is the part where I'm stubborn. I want to see where this suture is in the lower 48. I need that. Even if it's just a best guess, I need that. I'm lost otherwise. Like, I love Stephen Johnston's episode. I still couldn't quite see where that suture is. Remember, it was hidden in the shales. I don't even know where the shales are. And Stephen helped with his answer about going from, I'm remembering, Lake Louise over to Golden, remember? And he says, by the time you get to Golden, heading west, you're into the Ribbon continent. I want to do that same thing in the lower 48. And maybe Bob has backed off of this, but this is what I think I see. So what is this? This is North America laying on its side. So here's Mexico. Here's the lower 48. So here's Yellowstone, for instance. Here's Ellensburg. Now we cross into Canada. You with me? Coast Plutonic Complex. We're going north up by Myra's house. and we're crossing into Alaska. Okay, so Mexico to Alaska. Look what he has. I don't know the date on this. Oh, well, modified from Hildebrand 2014. So this is less than 10 years old. Green is ribbon continent. Cordilleran composite ribbon continent, indicating that there were 2, 3, 4, I don't know how many ribbon continents there were out in the Pacific, but they've all been accreted. And yeah, I mean, there's the huge complication of Baja BC, but again, I just want to find that suture. And that suture to me means, can we step off of Old North America and get onto it? Well, his color choice, I don't even know what to do with the thrust belts. But I want this line right here. And this is similar to what we did with Stephen. Oh, that dark blue is even gone once we get towards Yellowstone, once we get into Montana and Wyoming. So what I did, and I promise this is it, I'm going to zoom in. And I'm going to turn it right side up. So light blue is Old North America. Green is ribbon continent. Well, let me pause right there. This is a shitload of green. Sorry, Patrick. I told you these Ribbonista guys were radical. Look at all this material that was out in the water in one or more of these ribbon continents. And you're like, well, of course, you've been doing that the whole time. Well, I don't know. Like, can you see why now worrying about insular versus intermontane is maybe not the biggest worry? If you view it from this point of view and you're like, get down south. Okay, this is the last one I have for you. This is new for me as of this morning. Bob Hildebrand says, you want to go to the Sierra Nevada mountains in California? That's fine. There is more than a state worth of ribbon continent to the east of the Sierra. Now, I don't hear anybody saying that. I don't hear anybody saying that all of this stuff in Nevada and even half of Utah, I guess, aren't we? Like, here's Yellowstone, Wyoming. Here's southern Idaho. Here's where I did my master's thesis. I was close to the suture, according to Hildebrand, between Old North America and all this stuff, including the Belt Purcell. A bunch of the Belt Purcell is exotic. It's out in the water. And if you're a fan of geology, or if you are a geologist, you are just, I suppose, outraged by this message. But it's a purposeful choice. It's a purposeful choice for me personally, not to be outraged by anything. If it involves careful science work, especially if you're going through report after report, map after map, master's thesis after master's thesis, as Hildebrand has been doing at his home, in his retirement. This guy's just a furnace of ambition. And I value what he's doing. And we might get into it on Wednesday, but Bob feels like all this work is mostly ignored in the geology world and certainly the normal people world. And it's not like he's just making stuff up at his house. It's careful work. And I'm fascinated by it. And that's why he gets 2 shows. I think he's worth reading and thinking about. A toast to you. Here's to you for joining us today for this very unusual episode with Robert S. Hildebrand of Tucson, Arizona. Thank you for joining us. Here's to your health, your physical and your mental health here in 2023. Gesundheit. Here's to Robert S. Hildebrand of Tucson, Arizona, for the gift of his time and his energy and his magnificent slides. More of those coming on Wednesday at 2 p.m. Pacific time. Thank you, Bob. And here's to all of the people who have done all the individual work. You know, a couple of years ago in the backyard, I said, you know, I'm a guy that just likes to connect the dots between all these studies, and I like to find themes and everything. And I still remember one of you in the live chat that said, you want to connect the dots, you got to have the dots first, don't you? So here's to all the geologists who have spent so much hard-earned work. What? Here's to all the geologists who've spent so much time and dedication doing those detailed reports, so people like Hildebrand can come in and try to make sense of a regional pattern. Here's to them. It's been quite a stretch here in the series. Bunch of Canadians and Hildebrand coming back on Wednesday, February 1st at 2 p.m. Pacific. Where he will be sharing his thoughts about trying to resolve the Baja BC controversy. I'm sure that you will enjoy that one as well. I hope you enjoyed this one. Before I say goodbye, I just thought I'd share this. I got an email yesterday that caught my eye from Glenn in Spokane. And I just want to read it and then say goodbye. Glenn said, Nick, for the people who have commented on Facebook and YouTube about quote unquote watching all of your shows, I got curious about what that meant. And so I did a screen scrape of your YouTube channel today, January 27th, 2023. A screen scrape. I don't even know what that means. And Glenn says, I ran the numbers. Nick, on your YouTube channel, there are 391 videos available, 7.3 million views, with an average of 18,800 views per video. That's 435.23 hours, which is 18.1 full days of content. Or if you watched 8 hours of your videos a day, it would take you 54 days to watch. And of course, you recorded it all. So I do get asked about that on occasion, and I say, I don't know, I've never really looked it up. I don't know how to look it up. So thank you, Glenn. It is kind of surprising to hear those numbers since we started this in March of 2020. Couldn't have done it without you guys. Thank you. I love you. And goodbye from Ellensburg, Washington, USA. Home of Central Washington University, here in Discovery Hall, room 103. See you Wednesday. Bob, can you hear me? Bob. Bob. Bob, can you hear me? Bob, you're still talking. It's 55 minutes. You haven't heard a mm-hmm in like 45 minutes. He's locked in. Goodbye.